So thank you for coming to my session on Arcade. Thanks for the introduction. So Arcade is a very fun language, and I feel like it's one of those terms that we toss around when we say, is this kind of customization possible? Is this an option in my organization? And we always say, Arcade. Arcade's the way to do it. But not a lot of us actually get to work with Arcade on a daily basis. I will ask the question, though, who here has ever written something with Arcade? Oh, it's a good group of people. Okay, how many of you would call yourself experts in Arcade? Okay, none of you. That's amazing. Well, then hopefully you'll learn something here. The easiest Arcade function to write is now. It is just N-O-W in 2 parentheses. Can anybody tell me what now does? Current time and date. Yep. And so why might you want to use that? Well, in your organization, when you're trying to keep track of what work is done, you don't want to use editor tracking. Just go ahead and put now in there. You can make it a required field. You can hide it. And then they'll never know that you're tracking what they're doing. So Arcade. Arcade is a portable, lightweight, and secure expression language written for use in ArcGIS. Someone in Redlands wrote that for me, but just want to break down what does all of that mean. So portable, what does that mean? It means that we are going to do something across ArcGIS. So an Arcade expression that we're going to use in the map viewer, that we're going to use in field maps, that we're going to use in dashboards, that we're going to use in Experience Builder. The language is going to translate across those different components. You'll probably notice there are some things where one expression doesn't necessarily automatically translate. Like one of the limitations I found the other day, I was trying to do custom symbology, and then I said, oh, well, let me apply the script that I have running in my pop-up to get data from another layer and use that for my symbology, and that didn't work, even though it was the exact same language. So there are some limitations along the way, but most of the time it should be rinse and repeat here. Lightweight. What does lightweight mean? It means it's running on the fly. So this is how we can do something like in the space of a pop-up where we're just going to call another layer or call someone else's organization and bring that layer in. It's not something that's supposed to be racking the system or taking too much time on your device to load. If we think about something that's a heavy operation, like, okay, let me load my entire water data set for a state and just have that up on my phone here. But when I click on the pop-up and it's calling another layer, the level of power that that's consuming is nowhere near what actually loading the web map is doing. Secure. So secure means that if somebody takes your Arcade expression and applies it to their organization, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work. So within your organization, if you have those specific layers that are organizational only or they're owner only, if somebody gets a hold of that Arcade script, it's not going to work for them. It's not going to automatically call your content because it's secure within there. And really, Arcade without ArcGIS just means nothing because it doesn't work anywhere else. But at the end of the day, it is an expression language. So you write a statement, and you get a result. Sometimes, unless it doesn't work. And then, yeah, it's developed by Esri for Esri, so you all are in the most exclusive ArcGIS nightclub. It's just for you. What does make that difficult, though, is a lot of times when you're looking for support with it, probably no one in your IT will know how to do it. Versus something like, hey, I'm trying to do something in Python or SQL, there might be somebody who knows how to do it. So that tends to be why some people don't try things, is because I'm the only one that knows how to do this. So some components of actual Arcade, so we have the profile here. So that's something like a specific constraint here that's working with the pop-up. Maybe that's calling something in velocity. That's just where you're going to use that expression. And then we have some specific global variables. So things like the feature, the layer, the map. What am I wanting to call into my expression? And then we return a result. So whether that's a number, a text, a date, we're producing something at the end of it. And this is a sample expression here. And it looks like a lot of other programming languages. So what do I want to get out of it? Okay, I want a new label out of this. That's my output. The variable here, so I'm calling a feature. So in this case, this is I'm working on this actual feature. I'm not calling a feature from somewhere else in the map. This is the layer I'm working on. Then I have my initial constant here. So what do I want to do with that? The function, so I want to round that actual feature there. I can add a literal so that I can understand, like, hey, this is an actual degree that I'm trying to look at here. And then operators, so bringing different data together. So hey, by the way, add this literal and then add this literal together. It makes a lot of sense once you start breaking it down like that. When you look at it and go, what did that just spit out? I have no idea. Start reading it. And this is just another way of looking at it. I kind of like this graphic here because it's going to show you, like, what am I trying to accomplish, what is going to accomplish that, and what is it going to look like at the end. So for anyone who's taken any kind of programming class, I want you to apply that same logic when you're working within ArcGIS Online. So a couple things with Arcade. It is case insensitive, so it doesn't matter what case you're typing something in. Comments. Comments are really important when you're writing code because sometimes you'll get something accomplished and go, what does this mean? Or you're trying to explain it to someone else within your organization and they have no idea what it means. So always add a comment. You're going to do that with the double slash. You can also do a multi-line comment. So that's that second point there. So you do the slash, you do the asterisk, and that'll allow you to spread a comment over multiple lines without having to put the double slash in front of each line, because that gets annoying for sure. Statements can be on multiple lines. That's no problem. If you want to separate multiple statements, just use a semicolon. Now, for those of you who can see this here, can anybody tell me what this piece of Arcade is actually doing? And there is a sticker, if you can tell me. Yes? Speed. Okay, yep, that's mostly correct here. So what this is doing is it's taking those variables. So I have the degree and I have the speed. And what I need to do is calculate what direction the wind is going. So, hey, by the way, interpret these features, and then depending what criteria it meets, I want to assign that a category. So northeast, east. And then I need to combine some of those things together. So I'm creating a new variable called wind, which is speed. I'm adding a literal for miles per hour, and then I'm adding that directional variable, which I've just calculated off of this field here. And then what I'm going to return is a concatenated label and a formatted piece of text. There's a lot going on here, but what that means is now I've taken multiple pieces of disparate data, brought them together, assigned a category, and turned it into something useful. Does anybody have an example within their organization that they've done where you've tried to bring different pieces of data together to return a common result? Yes. So that's a great example. I mean, just bringing stuff together without having to transform it in your actual data. You got a sticker in the last one, so I have different stickers though, so we can talk about it. So just a couple other notes with this. So anytime you want to create a new variable, we declare that with var. Pretty consistent across coding languages here. I can also kind of use some of these different return. No, that's not what I want to go for. Access a feature layer. So there's ways to access multiple feature layers, and I think I have this on the next one that I really want to cover. No, we'll get to that. I got ahead of myself. So there's a couple different specific data types that we're going to add here. We can call attachments, we can call feature sets, feature set collections. We can also call items from a portal. So just because something isn't in my organization or maybe in that proper portal, if it's a public item that I get the item ID for, I can bring that in to my expression without actually having to own that content or even add it to my web map here. And these are just some of the data types that we work with, which we briefly covered in that beginning slide. And then those operators, again, kind of consistent with some other coding languages. I don't really think there's anything groundbreaking in this, so hopefully it's not too crazy. And then we have some built-in functions here. So like intersects is a really important one when we're working between multiple data sets. Like I'm in the field maps designer and I want my park name to populate when I create a new park asset. We're going to use intersect for that. Or now, that's what I talked about, that nice, simple, lightweight thing that's going to give me my current time and date without my mobile worker having to do anything. So there's a few of those that are going to be very helpful. Conditional statements. So this was what we saw in that example where I set a condition and said if it's in this range, it's going to be this. If it's in this range, it's going to be this. We can also loop things through that. So in the example that I gave in my last session with downloading content, like, okay, I want to cycle through every single piece of my content and find that until maybe a condition is true or not. So I have some additional examples here of like how to use Arcade across the platform. So if you want to shout out to me, what piece of ArcGIS are you currently using Arcade in? Labeling. Attribute rules. Pop-ups. Great, so a lot of map viewer stuff. Arcade can also be used in, do you have an answer to? Experience Builder. Yes, all right, we're going to cover that too. I'm very excited. So field maps. So if anyone who sat through 2.5 hours of me talking on Wednesday, we did kind of cover this example. This one I find is one of the most useful expressions for mobile workflows. It is in a blog called Common Calculated Expressions for ArcGIS Field Maps, if you want to give that a Google. So anybody want to take a stab at explaining what is this piece of Arcade doing? Yep, so we're calling a variable called regions, and this is where we're going to see a feature set by name. So I'm calling a feature set that is not actually the one I'm trying to transact on. I'm trying to get data from it. So calling that regions, I'm looking for its name. And then I'm creating this other variable which is saying the first thing that intersects, that's what I want to call. And then if there is a name that's being populated, it's going to populate that name into the appropriate field. So I talk about this a lot of times with asset collection. I think for like county and states, if you're wondering like, hey, I'm collecting an asset, what zone am I in? What district am I in? Am I within the boundaries of one of these really jagged municipalities? I think about poor Wisconsin Dells being in 4 different counties. Like, which county am I adding data in? So this is one I use a lot. Related features. So anyone want to take a stab at this one? Exactly. So in some cases, like on one hand, now this is another data type that I'm calling feature set by relationship name instead of feature set by name or feature data set, whatever I want to call. And then I'm trying to set a variable like, hey, hydrants, I need to populate that facility ID when I'm working with these related records. Okay, couple other ones. Now I did, is Dan here from WISDOT? We did find one little thing with that get user. So if you've got a lot of different users in your organization and you don't want to populate that domain list, or you have a lot of turnover like us, and you maybe are trying to vary your users without having to go in there and modify the list every single time, you can get the name of the user. But I did note it doesn't work offline. That was something I didn't realize. It's actually looking for your authentication, and when you're offline, it's not authenticating. And then this one down here, so if we're looking at maybe creating some kind of composite score, and that's another really popular one. So let's say I'm out doing some kind of housing inspection. Okay, well, I'm going to give the foundation a score. I'm going to give the roof a score, and I'm going to give maybe a habitability rating. What do I want to get at the end of that? Well, there's going to be some kind of calculation for me to prioritize. Okay, well, based on all these criteria, what house do I need to pay the most attention to? That's something that, if you're trying to rely on someone out in the field to do math, I'm not good at math. I work with computers to do the math for me, or maybe it's more likely we'll make an error. So let's make all those calculations happen in the background and not, at the expense of your user having to sit there and go, okay, what's 15 divided by 17? It gets a little obnoxious. Okay. Experience Builder. So this is the one that I'm really excited for because it's kind of, I guess maybe within the last year or two that Experience Builder has been able to be modified through Arcade. So on one hand, there's different formatting. With Experience Builder and dashboards, we've probably seen some really fancy examples with customization. Most of that is happening with Arcade here. So there is a code snippet in the corner, and just what this is doing is, on one hand, we're looking for a variable, and that's population. And then we're trying to give those different population categories a specific color. So I'm applying a specific code to it, and if it's like, hey, if you're over this category, we're going to apply this color, and below this category, we'll apply that color. Why is this important? Well, especially if you're building an app that's going to be used by a lot of people, or maybe you're building an app which is meant to be as functional as possible. Like, I want to glance at something quickly and get as much information without having to sit here and stare at it. Adding these pieces of conditional formatting can make that app just a lot more usable and a lot prettier too, and who doesn't love that? Another thing that we can do kind of individually, so when you want to go ahead and do that formatting, even just to a piece of text here, that last little button at the end is going to say Arcade, and that's where you're going to go to actually apply those changes to a specific text box or line of code. The other kind of interesting place here is, with that dynamic styling. So if we're going to set, hey, I could set it by condition, I could also do it by Arcade. You're just going to have to turn on dynamic style. And once you turn on dynamic style, you're going to get the Arcade editor to show up there. And the last one that I want to talk about within Experience Builder is being able to add data from outside organizations. So that, this code snippet here, what is it doing? So on one hand, I'm assigning a variable. That variable is going to be my portal. So maybe this is something I'm pulling from a state, maybe it's a vendor that I'm working with, maybe it's one of my municipalities. I don't have a partner collaboration set up. I don't want to bring their data into my map. And then I'm setting a variable, so hey, what feature service do I want to find within that portal? So that's the item ID. And then the other really nice thing about this is I can filter what data I'm bringing in before I actually bring it in. So you'll notice here I'm only pulling 3 fields from that, the city name, population rank, population class, because I don't need that whole data set to be part of my map. And then even before I end it, I can still filter on top of that. So I'm only getting the most relevant data to me. So this is really great if you're working with other organizations, and it's just like one of my favorite little hacks in Experience Builder. So I hope you like it. There's some documentation here, but what I want to do now is go back. How much time do we have?
You have like 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay, well then I can show some examples of this, and this is going to be exciting. Oh, let's see if I break it. Oh, God, all right. Yes. Okay. So on one hand, there's a couple different blogs here that I like. 5 underappreciated arcade functions. Just what those are real quick, and I'll just zoom in. So IIF, it's a great way to shorten what you're trying to work on. So, we've kind of always seen this where we got a variable, multiple lines. Okay, I'm having all that set there. You can just use IIF and keep it all on one line as opposed to having this kind of multi-line setup. In those more complex codes, that can be really, really helpful for you. Okay, and then, so this is an example of a very large feature that I'm trying to add together. So feature.diplomas.feature.adult population times that, whatever. I can also just assign that as text. So when I assign something as text, what that's going to do, it's going to give me the same output as all of this, but it's going to return it in just a simpler format. So it's making sure that it's coming out as text and not a number. And that can impact how I'm going to interact with it, how I'm going to symbolize it. It's just going to give you that, that line item in a much more usable way. Another thing that I want to show before I go into here, I think I have to go to this one. Other browser tab. So this is actually something that I use as a working template. We had a business problem and we were trying to figure out how to solve it. Addison, who you may have met here, is my account manager counterpart. And he said, I want to find a way to keep track of everybody that I've talked to. I want to make sure that no customer of mine goes more than 6 months without hearing from me. For good or bad, we just try and keep in touch with people. So what we ended up configuring was Arcade to solve this problem. Because, a list is fine, but sometimes I just really need to see something visually. I've also done this for people who are trying to do asset management scheduling. So like I had a county, they had to mow their roads twice a year. And what they were like, okay, well, how do I see what roads haven't been mowed? So this is an example of applying it to symbology. And as you see, Addison is really slacking in Indiana, so you can give him some grief for that. But on my symbology here, so I'm going into the styles within my ArcGIS Online here. And then instead of just selecting a different field, I'm creating an expression. So in this case, I did a 4-part date expression. Let's let that open up here. So on one hand, all that I had to do to achieve this was just have a date and time field within my feature layer. So I called a variable days, and there's my favorite little function now. So what is the difference between now and the date that was assigned within my, my feature there? And then I set those different categories. So, okay, if it's been more than 180 days, I want this category. If it's more than this, I want that category, and so on and so forth. What that did was, without actually having to modify my data in any way, I was able to achieve this symbology result, which I'm not going to touch it because he'll get mad at me. But when I change the date on that specific county, it's going to then reread that expression, re-symbolize it dynamically, and spit out a green county. So for those of you who are in the red, sorry. And one other thing that I want to look at in the context of Arcade here is using Arcade within the Field Maps Designer. So I did a whole workshop on it. Thanks for everyone who attended it. I'm just going to zoom this out a little bit so we can see it. Field work is one of those places where having calculated expressions can be really, really helpful. To find that, you just go into the Field Maps Designer. You're going to click on a specific form component that we're going to work with here. And then calculated expressions is all the way at the bottom. You're going to hit that little rotor there and then hit Create New Expression. One thing to note about this when we're using calculated expressions is they're not saved anywhere within the organization. They are specific to that item of content. So if I configure one calculated expression in one map, you're not going to see that as like an item or a piece of content within your organization that you can transfer out. So sometimes what people will do within their organizations, they'll copy and paste all the different arcade snippets and put them in one central editor. That can just be something that's very helpful to do. So anyways, this is a blog here, and I find it really helpful. So there's this blog, Use Arcade in Field Maps Designers, and then Common Calculated Expressions for ArcGIS Field Maps. That's the other blog that you might want to look at. The last thing that we're going to take a look at is the Arcade Assistant. So who here is actively using the Arcade Assistant? Couple of you? Okay. And I'm sorry, I think I might have Ohio's name on this demo, so we'll find out real quick. Maybe I changed it to Wisconsin. We'll see if I have it under WLIA. No, I don't. Oh, maybe I do. Open the Field Maps Designer. So to use the Arcade Assistant, you do have to enable the AI Assistance component. That is an organizational setting, and for those of you in my last session, you know where to find that. For those of you who don't, so sorry. So within this here, so let's say, this isn't the map that I wanted, but that's okay with me. I just want to pop in over here, and let's say, for example, the pop-ups. Pop-ups is something that we always want to customize. We always want to do something with them. I can go ahead and calculate attribute expression using Arcade if I wanted to, but I also have the option to add in a new component. So let's add in some Arcade. Let's not freeze on me. Edit the expression. So now I'm in my expression editor. One thing that's also really important is being able to name all your expressions, because you'll start testing it and then suddenly you have new expression 1, new expression 2. Definitely add which one you're actually doing. On the right-hand side here, though, you're going to see this attribute or this Arcade Assistant. Now, the Arcade editor was already kind of intuitive with being able to find those different profile variables and kind of pre-populate that data. But the Arcade Assistant is going to give you something very specific here. And I find it tends to be pretty correct. Does anybody remember what layer I had turned on here? So this was the National Weather Service smoke forecast. All right. Let's see what I have for data in here. Let's go ahead and let's say I want to ask a question. So create a table that shows all numeric fields in a grid. Let's try that. Let's see if it gives me anything. I don't know. So what that's going to do is going to think about it here. And sometimes it can take a while to think about it depending what you've asked it. Sometimes if it doesn't necessarily find the field that you want, it'll make up a field. I have found, like particularly with ChatGPT, one of the things it has a bad habit of doing is merging ArcMap documentation with ArcGIS Pro documentation. It'll also invent buttons that don't exist. I don't know if that did that generate or not. 2 minutes, perfect. We'll see if it can take 2 minutes then. If not, I have an example of one that it generated already. So this is an example of the Arcade Assistant in use. I gave it a prompt, a very specific prompt. So style the map by the year built field, break the field into 10-year increments. Anything built before 1900 symbolizes built before 1900. This is a very specific requirement here. And it spit out all that code for me when I wanted to do that because it was a very specific data set here. This probably would have taken me a couple hours to just figure out because I don't work with Arcade every day. I'm not the only person at Esri that works with Arcade, but working at a city or county, you might be that only person. So leverage this tool to kind of jumpstart what you're looking at. And if you find that it's getting you halfway there, think about how much time that has just saved you. So with that, I'll pop back in here to the PowerPoint. And one last note on Arcade. If you see someone's dashboard and it's got some custom features and it's a publicly available dashboard, you can go ahead, type this in here, and then add new #ID, find the item ID of that dashboard, and it'll copy that dashboard into your organization so you can see all the Arcade that's done. This is also, if you see all the Esri samples, you can go ahead and do that, and it'll generate with all the Arcade already in it. I see some pictures. So with that, I just want to say thanks so much for taking the time to learn a little bit about Arcade. If you are wondering if something's possible within your organization, if you're wondering, hey, this data isn't looking right, this data would be really great to have with this other data, or maybe I can just make this look prettier, Arcade's probably the way to go. So thanks so much for your time and attention, and if you have any questions, we'll be here for a little bit longer.